and welcome to GameSack. In this episode, I'm going to be taking a look at the Evercade VS or Versus console from Blaze Entertainment. Now, you may or may not recall I talked about the original Evercade portable system in a couple of different episodes. Well, now it's in a home console form factor, which is way more up my alley. Of course, this plays all of the same cartridges as the Evercade portable, but it's just in a form factor now that's a lot more convenient to deal with, at least in my opinion. Anyway, let's take a look at this thing. Here it is, the Evercade Versus. Inside the box, you'll find the medium-sized console itself. Below that are the two included game cartridges, the Data East Arcade 1 and Technos Arcade 1 collections. These contain a total of 18 different games. Below that, you get two USB controllers with extra long cords that use the same button configuration and D-pad that you'll find on the original Evercade portable system. Oh, and also a USB power cable, but no AC plug adapter. The console itself has 4 USB slots for controllers. There's also a power button which not only turns the unit on, but off as well. You need to hold it for half a second to turn it on. It has a little USB jack for your power, an HDMI jack which allows 1080p video, and a button that you can press when you're bored. It's supposed to be a reset button, but it's only active in some games. Most curiously, you have two separate cartridge ports underneath the lid on the front, labeled 1 and 2. That's right, you can load 2 carts at once, and if you do, then all of the games from both will be listed in alphabetical order on the menu screen, unless you sort them. Let's go over a few of the features of the Evercade Versus before we get into all the new games I want to show you. In the preferences, under the display option, you can choose a few different aspect ratios. Pixel Perfect is as sharp as you're going to get. It's a lot better than the HDMI out on the original Evercade portable. Here's the arcade version of Double Dragon 2 on the original Evercade, which only output up to 720p. And here's the same game on the Evercade Versus. Now the difference may seem subtle to you or maybe even not noticeable at all depending on how you're watching this video, but I certainly appreciate the 1080p output and the extra sharpness. You can also add subtle scan lines or even strong scan lines. Under the bezels option are several different wallpapers to choose from, and thankfully you can choose none as well. The theme is basically just how the main menu looks. Under sound, you can adjust the overall volume for the system. The network allows you to connect to your local Wi-Fi. Accessibility offers a high contrast mode, but only for the console menu. Language allows you to choose different languages for the menu, as you'd probably imagine. System lets you check for updates over Wi-Fi, which is really nice. You can also factory reset all of the options. Map Controller lets you assign any and all of the buttons on the controller to do whatever you want. This is kind of a hacky workaround to some of the cartridges having less than ideal button mapping, and a lot of them have less than ideal button mapping. This is really weird, but at least the option is there. Legal and support is an option that you'll likely never select, but it's gotta be there to cover their asses. Credits lists all of the people, including the crowdfunding backers. And finally, Secret allows you to put in a code that you get from somewhere to do who knows what. It's a secret. During gameplay, you can press the menu button on the controller for a few different options. You have a quick save and a quick load for save states. Or you can just go down to the regular save and load and choose from 6 different slots which give you a preview of where the save is. You can also look at but not adjust the controls. But you know what though? Some of the older ones will let you adjust the controls, but not the new cartridges. What's up with that? Maybe a firmware update can fix this? In some games like Gate of Doom, these are inaccurate as start doesn't pause the game and it doesn't tell you what the action buttons are. You can also adjust the display options in the same manner as the console preferences. Finally, you can quit the game and exit out to the game's menu. The controllers themselves feel mostly fine to me. You do have more shoulder buttons now than the original Evercade, which is interesting. Like I said before, I like having a console version as portability isn't really important to me, but the unit is small enough to take it over to your friend's house if you really want to. Okay, so let's take a look at a bunch of new cartridges for the Evercade. That's right, I came back on camera just to say that. Gotta remind you who I am, I guess. Wish someone would remind me of who I am. Let's start with the games that are included with the console. First up is Data East Arcade 1, which has 10 games. Bad Dudes vs. Dragon Ninja, Breakthrough, Burger Time, Chain Reaction, Darwin 4078, Gate of Doom aka Dark Seal, Lock and Chase, Sly Spy, Tumble Pop, and Wizard Fire aka Dark Seal 2. Almost ran out of breath there. I really like Bad Dudes, it's so much more enjoyable than the NES version. The button mapping on this one is far from ideal, but fortunately it doesn't matter a whole lot in a game like this. Still, I don't think that the people making the software for the Evercade will ever understand button mapping. Breakthrough is an interesting game where you have a car that shoots and jumps while the screen scrolls along. Unfortunately, it's just way too choppy to be very playable. I mean, look at that. Burger Time is basically just the arcade version of Burger Time, not much more to say. It looks pretty sharp. Chain Reaction is an interesting take on bust-a-move style games. Here, you can take shapes and then throw them at matching shapes to make them disappear. I like it, but the stage never seems to end and nothing really happens, so I ended up getting kind of bored. Darwin 4078 is a vertical shooter where you evolve your ship. I have the Mega Drive version, which takes place 3 years later in 4081. I like that one a lot more than this, though that one isn't outstanding or anything. It's kind of tough to see what's going on with this one. Gate of Doom has you roaming around an isometric world ruining lots and lots of bad guys. This one's pretty fun, if a little rough. Lock and Chase is a Pac-Man clone that succeeds in its goal of making a far worse version of Pac-Man. Sly Spy is one of the more interesting games here. It's a Data East take on Rolling Thunder and Shinobi, and it would be really fun if not for two things. First is the chunky scrolling, which is very hard on the eyes. The newest firmware does fix this somewhat though in pixel perfect mode. Next, the run and jump buttons are mapped to A and B, plus they're backwards. You can change this in the console's menu, but then they change for every game if you do that. Whoever creates these cartridges really needs a talking to. Then there's Tumble Pop. This is a cool little single screen game where you suck up enemies and then toss them out. It plays similar to most single screen arcades of this type, not bad. The last game is Wizard Fire. This is the sequel to Gate of Doom and it has much better graphics and audio. It's also pretty fun and it's a great follow-up. I'm glad both games are on here. Next is Technos Arcade 1 with Battle Lane Volume 5, Blockout, Double Dragon 2, Double Dragon 3, Mania Challenge, Minky Monkey, Mysterious Stones, and the Combat Tribes. Combat Tribes? I don't know. Battle Lane Volume 5 reminds me of Action Fighter or Spy Hunter with you on a motorcycle shooting up screen. It's not horrible and of course it's a bit choppy. It's also really difficult, so it'll take a lot of practice. Where are volumes 1 through 4 of this epic saga? Blackout is basically like a 3D Tetris. Rotate the blocks and place them. I think this one's also on the Genesis. I don't like it. Double Dragon 2 is pretty insane. The enemies are all over you and never let up. At least they got the button mapping correct on this one. The X button attacks left, the B attacks right, and the A button in the middle jumps. It's hard as hell and nowhere near as good as the NES version. Double Dragon 3 is definitely the worst of the arcade beat-em-ups. Look how choppy the sprites move. The collision detection isn't so hot either. The button mapping in this one is awful. You may be wondering where the first Double Dragon is. Blaze said that they didn't put it on here because of all of the slowdown that's naturally in that arcade game which they wanted to fix, but couldn't. Mania Challenge is an ancient wrestling game that's okay, I guess. Not a lot of moves that I can figure out anyway. Minky Monkey has you climbing ropes, moving fruit up and down, but good luck because there's a monkey that's always right on your ass, and if he touches you, you die. Stupid outbreak monkey. Mysterious Stones has you playing the role of an Indiana Jones type character. This really isn't my type of game, but hey, maybe you'll like it. Finally, we have Combat Tribes. This is the most interesting game on the cartridge. It's an odd looking and odd playing beat 'em up, but it's fun and I definitely like it. The levels mainly have you moving back and forth until you beat all of the enemies and then you fight the boss, which may open up more of the level as you do so. Not bad. I think the reason for the choppy scrolling in the arcade games is because, well, a lot of arcade games have different frame rates than modern televisions. It would be nice to have the ability to slightly speed up or slow down the gameplay so it could more match what, we can see on modern TVs, kind of like MAME does. Now, I'm not sure if this can be addressed in a firmware update or not. Anyway, I've got 10 more cartridges to show you with 101 games among them. I'm not going to cover each and every individual title, but I'll show you each cartridge so you can get an idea of what they're about. This is Galeco Arcade 1. Galeco is a Spanish arcade developer. This one has 6 games with Alligator Hunt, Biomechanical Toy, Glass, Snowboard Championship, Thunderhoop, and World Rally. I've never heard of any of these games before, much less actually played them, so this cartridge is kind of a treat. None of the games here are bad, though some are certainly better than others. World Rally has some choppy scrolling, but this is as bad as it gets. The newest firmware seems to have fixed the scrolling in pixel perfect mode, and as a result it's now my favorite game on the cartridge. I love it. I like Alligator Hunt's take on Cabal-style gameplay, and Biomechanical Toy is a fairly good run-and-gun / platformer. This is definitely a recommended cartridge. This is the Atari Arcade 1 collection, which has arcade games by Atari, of course. You get 13 games here: Asteroids Deluxe, Canyon Bomber, Centipede, Crystal Castles, Liberator, Lunar Lander, Millipede, Missile Command, Night Driver, Pong, Skydiver, Super Breakout, and Warlords. These are extremely early games, and as a result, this cartridge might not have a lot of appeal to most people. Many of the games used trackballs or rotary paddles in the arcade, and it's super tough to play them here with the D-pad, especially when the movement seems to be so fast. It can be really tough to control. Maybe they could add compatibility for various USB rotary paddles and trackballs and whatnot. But hey, who doesn't want to play a really crappy version of Pong? I'd definitely pass on this cart, though. I've got to say that Lunar Lander is pretty fun. Next up is Jellico Collection 1 with 10 games included as Styanax, Bases Loaded, Brawl Brothers, City Connection, Earth Defense Force, Operation Logic Bomb, Rival Turf, Super Goal 2, The Ignition Factor, and Totally Rad. There are a couple of decent beat-em-ups on this one, as well as a couple of good NES games. The good news is that they mapped the controller correctly for the Super Nintendo games, though of course the button labels themselves are different, but that's okay. Unfortunately, they ignore the X button for everything else, and you jump with the controller's B button. Again, I just don't understand why they can't figure out that people want to jump with the controller's bottom button and attack with the left button on the diamond configuration. Nintendo, Sony, Microsoft, and hell, even Sega figured this all out immediately. Why can't Blaze? Remapping via the Evercade OS is kind of a mess, and you have to change it back if you want to play the Super Nintendo games. Why can't I change it on a per-game basis here? Otherwise, this collection isn't bad. Here's Pico Collection 2 with 13 old IPs that Pico swallowed up, like Beast Ball, aka Brutal Sports Football, Eliminator Boat Duel, Football Madness, Full Throttle, Hoops Shut Up and Jam 1 and 2, no Charles Barkley here, Power Football, aka Mike Ditka Power Football, Racing Fever, Soccer Kid, Summer Challenge, Top Racer 2, Winter Challenge, and World Trophy Soccer. If you're into mid-tier sports games, you might enjoy this. I don't recall Power Football having music when I rented it, but it has it here. Maybe there's a toggle somewhere. I didn't play long enough to find out. There's a few racing games here as well, and the most interesting one is definitely Racing Fever. Overall, I've got to say that this cart didn't do much for me other than Racing Fever. Next is Indie Heroes with 14 games. Alien Cat 2, Anguna, Chainbreak, Dedius, Deader, Doodle World, Flea, Foxyland, Kubo 3, Ploid, Quest Arrest, Super Homebrew War, Twin Dragons, and Akuzan. As you can imagine, most of these are very simple games based on NES or Game Boy hardware. In fact, this cartridge is likely the only physical release for the great majority of these titles. Some of the games aren't bad, like Foxyland, which is based on Genesis hardware. Don't get me wrong, it's not super deep either. I don't care for the way some of the slimes move in Naguna, which makes them extremely difficult to hit. Their randomness is very off-putting. Still, if you're into simple indie games, this might be a good one for you to check out. Here's Worms Collection 1. Really? There's going to be a part 2? This has Worms, Worms Armageddon, and Worms Blast. I've never been interested in the Worms games, but if you are, then you're going to enjoy this. The only thing interesting to me here is that Worms Armageddon is a PlayStation game and the FMV and the audio seem to work pretty well. Otherwise, it's just Worms. Next is Codemasters Collection 1 with 17 games. On here is B-52, Big Nose Freaks Out, Big Nose the Caveman, Boomerang Kid, CJ's Elephant Antics, Cannon Fodder, Cosmic Spacehead, F-16 Renegade, Linus Spacehead, Megalomania, MiG-29 Soviet Fighter, Psycho Pinball, Sensible Soccer, Stunt Buggies, Super Skid Marks, Tennis All-Stars, and The Ultimate Stuntman. There are a lot of games on here, and of course they're of varying quality. I never really got much into the Codemasters stuff myself. That's not to say that there aren't some fun titles on here, but I really do think you'll enjoy this one a lot more if you happen to be British. If you're not, approach with caution. A few of these titles are going to have some of the worst audio you'll ever hear. This one is Mega Cat Studios Collection 2. This one has 8 games with Alter Ego, Arcagus Revolution, Dev Will 2, Gluff, Misplaced, Romeow and Julie Cat, Roniu's Tale, and Yazzie. How did they come up with these names? This is similar to the Indie Heroes cartridge in that all of the games are indie. All of these are Genesis games except for Roniu's Tale, which is NES. And all of them are puzzle games except for Arcagus Revolution. So all in all, it doesn't really have much for me since I'm not a big fan of puzzle games. But Arcagus Revolution is a really fun shooter that's reminiscent of the arcade game called Assault. Here's the Intellivision Collection 1 with 12 games. You get Astro Smash, Buzz Bombers, Frog Bog, Night Stalker, Pinball, Princess Quest, Shark Shark, Slapshot Pro Hockey, Snafu, Thin Ice, Thunder Castle, and Word Rockets. I don't have any nostalgia for the Intellivision, and this might be the first time I've ever played it, even emulated. A lot of these games need a keypad, which you can call up by holding one of the shoulder buttons. If you like the Intellivision, you might get a kick out of it, but I just can't get into it. Princess Quest is a newer game from 2014 like Ghouls and Ghosts though, which is almost cool. Finally, we have the Bitmap Brothers Collection 1. This gives you 5 games with Speedball, Speedball 2100, Speedball 2 Brutal Deluxe, the Chaos Engine, and Xenon 2 Mega Blast. Once again, I think it might help if you're a bit British or at least European with this one. I've never been able to get into Speedball or really any futuristic sports game. What's interesting to me though is that Speedball is the Master System version. Speedball 2 is the Genesis version. Speedball 2100 is the PlayStation version. The Chaos Engine is the Super NES version, and it's the best game on here unless you really dig Speedball. Xenon 2 is the Mega Drive version, I think. It's pretty awful and probably the worst game on here unless you really hate Speedball.
Special power. Special power.
And there's the Evercade VS as they call it, but they're perfectly fine if you call it the Versus instead. I am very disappointed in the lack of control option in this latest batch of cartridges, but I am hoping that they can fix that with a firmware update. I don't know if they can or not, but I am hoping they can. Anyway, I think this goes a long way to making it more viable for home use. So what do you think? Are you going to get an Evercade VS Versus? Why or why not? Let me know. In the meantime, thank you for watching GameSag. You know, I forgot to take this apart at the beginning of the episode, so let's see what makes it tick. Green Dog on the Sega Genesis? I don't know what's real anymore.